You're watching the Realme 9i disassembly. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and follow me on Twitter so you'll be notified when I upload new content. And if you need any tools, there are links in the description. First, the SIM tray needs to be removed. Next, we need to apply heat to the back plate using a hairdryer or a heat gun to loosen up the adhesive underneath, and then we're going to use a plastic pry tool to pry the back plate off. Here's a better look at the plastic back. There are 18 Phillips screws that need to be removed. Next, we need to place a plastic pry tool in between the back housing and the frame of the screen and run it along the edges to pop off the catches. Once the back housing is free from the frame, it needs to be lifted from the right to the left, and be careful since the flex cable for the fingerprint reader is still attached to the main board. First, we need to disconnect the battery cable. Once the battery cable is disconnected, we can proceed to disconnect the rest of the cables. The back housing itself is made of plastic, and the glass camera lens covers can be replaced by applying heat and prying those glass portions off. And there's graphite film which helps transfer heat. On the back, there's more graphite film to help transfer heat, and there are numerous antenna flex cables around the edges. The gold points on the antenna flex cable make contact with the points on the motherboard, which give it signal. There's a coaxial cable on the top right of the board, which needs to be disconnected by popping it off. There's also graphite film and copper tape covering the front-facing camera connector, which needs to be peeled off so we can disconnect and remove it. Here's a better look at the 16 megapixel front-facing camera. There's a single Phillips screw holding down the main board that needs to be removed. Now the main board can be lifted up and removed. Taking a closer look at the motherboard, the 50 megapixel primary camera is located on top, and the 2 megapixel macro and black and white lens below it. The connectors for the cameras can be disconnected by just popping them off. Also, none of the cameras have OIS or optical image stabilization. The LED flash is located next to the primary camera. There's a secondary microphone located on top, copper tape over the shield, and there are rubber gaskets around the connectors. Even though we dunked the phone in water in the durability test, there are no signs that any water got inside the phone. The proximity sensor is located on the back on the top, as well as the SIM card and memory card reader. There's also more copper tape and thermal paste on the back shields. Once the copper tape is peeled back, we can see thermal pads on top of the processor and RAM, as well as thermal paste on these chips. Here's a better look with the thermal pads removed. The speaker assembly can be lifted up and removed. There's some more graphite film on the speaker assembly, and there's a mesh filter over the opening. Here's the speaker itself. The flex cable connecting the main board to the subboard can be disconnected, as well as the other end of the coaxial cable. Now the subboard can be lifted up and removed. There's a rubber gasket around the connector, charger port, and headphone jack, and the primary microphone is located in the center. Here's a look at the other side. The vibrator motor is located on the bottom and it's held down with some adhesive, so if you need to replace that, you can just gently heat it up and pry it off. To remove the battery, there's a pull tab provided to help pry the battery off. Here's a better look at the 5000 mAh battery. Once the battery adhesive pouch is peeled back, we have a better look at the screen cable and the flex cable connecting the main board to the subboard. If you need to replace your screen, you would have to remove the back plate, as well as the screws on the back housing, and remove the back housing itself. At that point, you'd have to disconnect the battery cable and the screen cable, pry off the battery, giving you access to the screen cable, and then you'd peel off the adhesive over the screen cable, heat up the front of the phone where the screen is to loosen up the adhesive underneath, pry your old screen off, apply new adhesive, reapply your new screen, making sure you run the screen cable back through the opening in the mid-frame, and reassemble your phone. Once this flex cable is peeled back, we can see a 3D layer of graphite which runs underneath the battery and the motherboard to help transfer heat. Moving on, the flex cable for the power button clicker as well as the volume keys are both held on with adhesive, so if you wanted to replace those, you would have to peel them off. The earpiece speaker is located on top, and that's also held on with some adhesive. There's also a liquid damage indicator underneath the SIM reader, and it remains white, indicating no liquid damage, meaning no water got inside the phone during our durability test. So I would say this phone is somewhat water resistant, not just splash proof, based off the rubber gaskets around the connectors and the adhesive around the phone. There's also a rubber gasket and filter over the microphone opening on the bottom and on top, and the rubber gasket on the frame where the speaker assembly sits over. For the repairability score, I give this phone a 6.5 out of 10. Now it's time to put the phone back together. Once everything is back in place, apply new adhesive and reapply your back plate. Flip over the phone, power it on, and you're done. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.